by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
Twilight. Thank you. Thank you so much for spending your life with us. This epoch, this wonderful epic of a story, known as the Charles Manson phenomenon, is what we primarily discuss here on Twilight Garage. David Rogerson, producer Alex, my wonderful co-host, Casey, the big Case Fields. We call this the Brothership Connection. Glad for you to join us. Hoping you've read Helter Skelter by Vince Bugliosi. Correspondingly, there's a new standard on the block, which has been making the rounds of some documentaries and is changing the narrative a bit. In almost reflection of the crazy Tom O'Neill book, CIA, blah, blah, blah. We've got Goodbye, Helter Skelter from George Stimson. So we're going to have a lot of these discussions. That's why we are still early in the main book, of course, the greatest true crime. I almost stumbled on it. I was like, crime. Wait a minute. There's a whole new genre, kid. It's not just crime. It's true crime. Hashtag like, subscribe. Like, subscribe. Like, subscribe. Like, subscribe. Like, subscribe. Dude, there's almost 200 subscribers now.
Wow.
I'm dying.
Thank you.
Twilight Garage Sensei. So we're early on in the Vince Bugliosi book, the largest selling true crime story of all times, written by his co-host, Kurt Gentry, co-host. I'm looking at you. His ghostwriter.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it was, as pointed out by you, a very similar story that he'd written previously, a work of fiction. And Helter Skelter was one of the threads in this larger book. So we've written that phenomenon for 50-something years. We've got the George Stimson rebuttal, and now we're kind of breaking it down. And I say all this because we've gone a few episodes of really digging into Helter Skelter. And if you haven't read the book, please at least check out the cheat version, understand where they were getting with it so that you can enjoy this to the fullest. Because I think we're back at CLO. I want to talk about the motivations of the killers because much is made of it. Obviously. What isn't clear is the individuals that approached the murder house. Now, we've talked about their frame of mind. Now, break down who they are and what your first thoughts were, because we've left the house. Clearly, or the ranch, rather, Spawn's Movie Ranch in Chatsworth, California, under the behest and small directions of Charles Manson. We've all established that. That's one thing that has not been argued. Whether he's responsible for these killings or not is a great matter of discussion. But we're now on our way to the murder house.
Got lost on the way. Normally, typically, it's about a 28 to 30-minute drive at that time of night. Yes, I don't know what happened. They missed a turn off, or they might have gone through one of the canyons rather than the freeway. I don't know, but they eventually drive up Cielo Drive to the end of the cul-de-sac where the Tate Polanski residence is, and they kind of check things out. I think
super quiet. That kind of night, much is made of it. Okay. I grew up, as I love to talk about, Ridgecrest, California. A lot of different elevations in a very small confined area. A lot of air movement. A lot of different weather variables. Sometimes the air hangs heavy. You can't hear somebody next to you. Other times, the air is very thin. Sound will travel miles and miles. Sometimes there's reverberations and echoes off of canyon walls. Much has been made of that, but that night was real clear and real quiet. So they've come up and they've staked it out because of that. Because when you've been in a car, right, your ears are accustomed to the noise of Johnny Schwartz's 59 Ford. Then you get out, and you realize, hey man, maybe we've been the center of attention because we're creating noise, and then we're in a quiet environment. So they're like, doink.
Now Tex gets out, and the way that I understand, he climbs up on the hood of the car in order to reach the pegs, or I don't know what that they're called, but on a telephone
the lineman's
pole, right?
pegs or whatever.
Yeah. So he climbs up, he snips the wires. I believe there was 3 wires.
Correct.
He chose 2 of them were telephone wires. I don't know what the other one was.
Electrical.
Yeah, because there was a telephone
to run
in the guest house, also a telephone in the main house. And then the 3rd wire might have actually been to the gate. I don't know.
As I'm saying, I think it was power to the gate.
Yeah.
And that's why there may have been some, differences of opinion as to how they got out, because there's the fingerprint on the controller on the way out.
Yeah.
Much was made of, was it the 3rd detective on the scene who we like to rip on, who you think about, he was just doing his job. He gets this call. Wait, what? Maybe a homicide. Yeah. So he's like, okay, hold up. I'm going to finish my coffee here. They're driving these cars. Think about the clothes that were different back then. He's got an undershirt, probably a starch thing on. You know what I mean? It's a hot day, early in the day. You pull into the most infamous murder scene in modern history. And like he said, I just had to get out of there. So the officer superimposed his print on a latent bloody print, but we have not established.
We'll get to that too, because Winifred Chapman the next morning hits the controller on the way in and on the way out.
Exactly. So who is guilty of that? We don't know. But secondly, that begs to understand. Then we have another question, and this is why this case just will not stop. Okay. Did the gate open? Okay. So if the gate has opened, then clearly
that wire wasn't to that.
Right. So then we've got a cognitive effect here. So did Tex.
Now here's the crazy thing. A lot of people don't know this. There was a bell on the gate, which the neighbors talked about. Every time it opened, they could hear that bell ring. But allegedly there was a bell or an alert system inside the Cielo main house, where when that gate opened, it alerted the residents. Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that might have been the line to the alert into the house.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting that Tex, you know what I mean? There's communication lines. So he clipped 2 of the 3. So there was a decision-making process that had happened. So his mind was at least clear enough to do that. And I think that's part of why he's never really been actively considered for parole, is when you have that level of cognizance and pre-planning and ability to execute actions, it speaks to your intent and your culpability in the actions. And I think that's one of the things that really damned him. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, he's always changing his story. Even in his last couple parole hearings, he feigns like he forgets certain things. And I don't know, maybe he does. Maybe his mind really is going. But I don't know. Sometimes, let me get back to this.
Yeah.
He cuts the wires. They drive back down the hill. They park the car on the side at the bottom of the entrance, because this is only a one-way road.
Exactly.
All the way up.
Oh, and it's so tight. And that's why people don't understand. When I talk about it being quiet, it's all ivy. Things are very tight. It's very intimate. When you're in there, it's almost like being in an amusement park on those cars they drive on the trail. It's single lane, baby. You don't really see much of that anymore because fire safety and different things that have happened since then. And that's why.
So the walk from where they parked the car up to back up to the gate was about a 4 to 5 minute walk. And when they get up there,
again, intent. So you've been there, you've acted, you've used tools. So you're beyond a primate now. and then you've come back with this vehicle. It just shows so much premeditation and active participation on everybody's part. You walked up there, nobody dragged you.
Now, one of the things I was surprised when I started researching the case was how shitty of a gate this was.
Oh,
This is like a cyclone fence
exactly.
that's on wheels, right?
Rickety.
Yeah, and like it doesn't match the quality of the home that's behind it.
It's definitely probably one of the last things to be upgraded. That thing probably goes back to the time of Lillian Gish. The door sold for money. Why didn't, when they modernized that gate? Can you imagine all the movie stars that had worked with that gate?
And at the time of the murders, the gate was cyclone and for the most part see-through. There were a couple signs on it saying warning, no trespassing and whatever. But
Well, in the 70s, they had the wooden slats put in.
Shortly after, even weeks after the murders, if you see pictures, he's already added security. They'd extended the top of the gate.
Yep.
They put some like razor wire or something, barbed wire at the top.
Can you
But
imagine?
the way that the killers got in was on the very side, there's an embankment that goes up into the hill, right?
Mhm.
So if you're able to do like we used to do as kids, right? You either go over the top of the fence or you go up the embankment a little bit. So now you're jumping a fence that's half the size.
Sure, because if you guys are not aware of what we're talking about, there's a sloping asphalt driveway that came up. Here was the gate at the near crest of it. So there's a hill, maybe, 30-something degree hill, pretty steep, right? But the chain link fence that terminated the intersection of the gate, right?
Yep.
So there's a post. So they more than likely ran up a little bit and just stepped over the fence, like you're saying. Because people would always wonder, well, how could they access it? Da, 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 da. And then this gets us into the question that we brought up recently of the Stephen Parent part of the thing. Now we've got them entering now. They walked up 4 or 5 minutes. Now, can you imagine their conversation then? Because apparently Tex had been directing them throughout the drive up, because we don't know exactly what he said, but man, if you've been having a three-way with two of the girls in the car, you got these two, like Linda Kasabian looked pretty all right at the time. You've got kind of Susan, but she was pretty enthusiastic. You're on speed. You're on all these different drugs that he was on, right? And now they're tripping, which gives you a clarity. It gives you an alertness, and it gives you a physical strength. But if you've been on speed, it's allowing your speed trip to continue. Hence probably some of the savage behavior that we're going to get into next. But he's in the car with two chicks and Chewbacca. And now they're walking, right? So Susan's got ripped up syphilitic sores on her feet. Right? So she's walking up, with scabby feet. And then we got goddamn Linda, the rat, who more than likely, I feel, participated in the murders, at least holding Sharon down.
Yeah. So if you go by
And
this
Chewbacca.
gentleman's work, right? They jump the fence and immediately they see headlights coming towards them. Right. So they dive into the bushes or hide or whatever. Next thing you know, this guy he gets up to the gate controller to open the gate. And in doing so, all of a sudden someone comes out of nowhere, slashes his wrist that had a watch on. The watch flies into the back seat. All of a sudden, Tex is there with a gun on him.
Halt!
And Steve Parent's like, just let me go.
I won't say anything. I won't tell anybody.
Yeah.
That's allegedly what happened, which is very interesting. I think what would support that, because the other argument sounded very convincing and good about him perhaps being killed after the fact. And I think part of that, it's either did Tex Watson's gun become non-functional when he wrapped it around Wojtek Krakowski's head, therefore negating Stephen Parent being killed later? Or, did that not happen? because the killing of him initially, it can make sense either way. What are your feelings since you've had this story about him potentially being killed later? What do you feel about that? Because this is the first thing that we have in terms of engagement.
I think it's an intriguing theory. This is where Garrettson's testimony is tough, right? Because he says when he wishes him a goodbye, I'll see you later. He's standing in the doorway. Steve gets in his car because Steve actually parked on the property.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
The gate had been functional. He was there previous to the killer's arrival.
Mm-hmm. And there's two pathways now in this house. You have the main property with the house, a large grass area.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get closer to the edge of, I'll call it the cliff, looking out onto LA, there's a lower path. That's probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet below in elevation. And so it's possible that Steve might have been walking out of Garrettson's, heard some kind of commotion, argument, whatever, yelling, and kind of ducking, around, looking, and finally got to his car and just was trying to haul ass out of there.
And then that's maybe why he said what he said, because that's a very awkward statement. And I don't understand also why you wouldn't say something to the effect that he was killed first if he hadn't been. Why did that testimony stand? Why has that argument never been reviewed? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, unless you want to go to the extremes and say, well, we just keep repeating the same story because we don't want to rankle the parole board. But that seems like a weird detail if you're going to override the potential beating of Wojtek, of the rounds discharged adding up into the pistol after the fact, and then the condition of the gun, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's important to note there's been others that have examined this. The shape, the geography of the property is interesting, right? It's rounded around this hillside, and out there's like this giant expanse into the valley, right?
Yeah. Well, visually it disappears.
Yeah.
It's almost like a forever pool. So when you come up the drive, so it's yellow, here's the gate, there's a garage over here, there's this little fence thing where there's much made of the twinkly lights still being on them. This is the path the Casey was talking about. Here's the main house, here's the pool, and here's Garrettson's pad, right? So the front door is over here. Bukowski came out the front. Allegedly, Folger came out the back. They were both, their bodies were here. Here's the living room, allegedly, where Tate and Sebring were found. And then up here, the body in the driveway of Stephen Parent in this somewhat defensive posture.
So I'm thinking, because of the way that this is shaped around the side of this hill, right? That sound travels. There's a lot of open area for sound to travel. And so therefore it's going to hit different down in the canyon. Like if you stand in front of the guest house and yell something, you're going to affect stuff to the north and the west of the property. Everyone below that is going to hear you. Whereas if you say something over by the garage or closer to where the gate is, you could reach a whole different
part
area,
of the canyons.
Which and so when people talk about,
you've got the view side here, I hate to cut you off.
Yep.
We have the view side is what Casey's talking about, which is more what you see now with that crazy monstrosity of a mansion they built on it. He can't even sell it for the property value. Built that huge, weird, creepy Mediterranean villa on top of things. One tree survives, right? There's like a water park for the happy kids or the weird, creepy Diddy orgies, whatever. Above this murder scene, what an actual, wow. But we see that view side. So what you're talking about, that's a huge, almost like amphitheater type expanse. So there's no telling where that projection might happen. The house was this direction, but there was also this bucket of a canyon that then opened up into more of a megaphone on the other side. That is a very salient and strong point.
And so there's a chance that if a gunshot takes place over by the gate,
Okay.
that people that are over on Summit Ridge might hear that better than somebody that's, say, in the back of the guest
because
house,
we've got a diffusing element of this hillside that protrudes in between the driveway and the house. There's a slight block there. It's almost like cell phone coverage. Because the other thing too is the foliage. There's trees. So when maybe when Abigail Folger was screaming on the lawn, she could have been heard on the view side, but not been heard on the closer side, simply because of the trees and the shape. There's also a cliff on that side. That's why she didn't keep running. People are like, why didn't Abigail keep running? Well, I'll tell you why, because she knew beyond that little fence, it was just hell. She was just going to get it worse.
It's weird. I've never read a study on this before, but it's weird how sound travels at night too. The reason being, I mean, I live like 5 miles from the freeway, but at night when I'm working at 3 a.m, it sounds like the freeway is like right down the street.
Some of that is the gamma rays of radiation coming off the sun. It's a whole just major list of factors that come into play when you try to apply science to this. That's why we keep coming back, because these are just familiar stories with characters we've grown to know and sometimes care about. And we're just applying our research and our science, as George Stimson did in this book, which has changed the narrative a bit. And I think it's just now going to get more interesting with technology and how we can. I want to model these crime scenes. I want to model some of the conditions, because a lot of times the things that are taken for granted in the story, you've debunked right here on Twilight Garage. That's why, after you like and subscribe, please do go back and look at some of these earlier stories where you talked about the temperature, which also was in direct,
much cooler than what this guy says.
Exactly. And then coming into the other factors, which would also mitigate some of the narrative that we've become accustomed to.
A big one is
it's the barometric pressure that we're not, if it's cooler, what you're saying is you've changed the barometric pressure. And when these people are giving these testimonies in these books that are taken for granted generation after generation, and researchers, unlike the great Deb Silva, who apply, what are we going to do? Well, let's check the weather report. And Stoner likes to say, show me the receipts, right? So that's what we've done here. And when you brought that up last time, I don't mean to just like pull the Twilight air brake on that, but I gained so much out of that. This season, I've been going back and reviewing a lot of the documents in relation to the Tate murder house, simply because of your adjustment of those facts.
Another big one is that Tex was using a 22 caliber buntline revolver, right?
It's not what it was.
Which is not a loud blaster at all.
But the term buntline refers to Ned Buntline, who was a lawman and was most famously with Wyatt Earp and these different exchanges at the Oki Corral and so forth. He's become synonymous with this scale of pistol, this look of this particular pistol. You know, it was actually a high standard Longhorn. And they're very interesting pistols. There weren't that many of them, especially at that time in circulation. That's why they were able to narrow down what it was, who may have purchased it, where it may have come from once they had it in law enforcement sites. Because, you know, we always love the story of the law enforcement centric Boy Scout who like found it, and really little Stevie who figured this shit out, put it together. I love that part of it. But this part, just in the driveway, we have so much to consider. So we're going to stick with the narrative here for now that Stephen Perrin has been killed, and we've walked past the car now.
Let's get to the the split rail fence.
Exactly. Much is made of this. Now let's get into that, and then all this poetic license that's been used over the years. The twinkling Christmas lights left by the ever innocent and gorgeous and Hollywood legacy retaining, not slutty, terrible broad like this Texas usurper, the great daughter of Victor Borgia, the fine Candice Bergen, the beautiful
Murphy Brown.
Man, her Christmas lights, like, they got more love and respect, moral purity than the victim, bro. Like, those lights, to me, that was like a very nasty symbol, not because it had nothing to do with her, it had nothing to do with the victim. Just the way people will turn a phrase for a profit. Like,
okay,
that's very distasteful.
I'm gonna drop a good movie on you in regards to that. Check out a movie, I believe it came out in 2015, called The Invitation. It's a thriller, and it's a house party up in an area like Benedict Canyon.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's some stuff that goes on, and the ending of that movie has hints or reflections of what happened this night.
Reflections of the way murders used to be.
So if you guys check out that movie, I want you to do it in light of thinking about these lights that were on at CLO.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the Murphy Brown lights, man, that just the way that's been handled, the way people were dismissed, these poetic licenses that I think have really crushed some people over the years and just made these lines of division. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like either you like the case and you want to talk about it, or you find it very distasteful and disgusting. And you're like, Charles Manson and his family, are you serious? But it's this whole thing that I think has happened very naturally. That's why I don't like it being taken with literature, because they know what they're doing. They're writing this book. They're going to mold public opinion, right? And I feel George's book is the first one that didn't get really nasty, ugly, and personal and leave people with a taste in their mouth. Either you were pro Terry Melcher.
We got to get George's book.
We got
to get it out here.
Oh, I thought this was the goodbye.
No.
I keep talking
we got to get it out here.
We don't have this thing propped up.
Put it on your side.
Yeah, dude. No, cat. See, I have the old copy, so I've been pointing at it like George. Okay, George is on my side. Much like time. Time is on my side, and George Stimson, I hope.
Shout out George.
God bless America. God bless George Stimson. Thank you, Peason Hall Press. Thank you. Hey, Ranger, buddy. He's giving a woof out. He wants to meet Sandra Good, I think. I think Ranger wants to meet Blue real bad. Ranger has a thing for Blue, wants to say woof, woof to Blue. So we send a hearty dog paw and a woof to Blue, even though she's not a big dog person. But yeah, we love this angle about these lights, because I feel this Hollywood royalty has been built up in these stories. And then people, we love to choose. We love to have a friend. We love to have a winner. We got to have a loser. You know, when somebody's high, we love to see them knocked down, get a little schadenfreude. So those lights are, I don't know, real ugly.
And a lot of people don't know that they had to push parents' car out of the way. So there he is in the driver's seat, leaned over, and they push his car closer to the garage. That way, if anybody comes in, they don't know it's not right there in the way, right?
No, so that would support. And were handprints on the hood? Let's clear that.
I can't remember. I know that there was Linda's thumbprint was in the glove box.
There you go.
She went rifling through his stuff.
Well, she's just oh my God, dude, there's so many things about that girl that are so distasteful that could really get into, and we're going to, because I'll just be very honest with you and very transparent. I feel Linda Kasabian was very instrumental in the choice of this house, our previous relationships with these people, her participation in the murders, and I think why she was never held accountable. And she got away with being a prosecution star witness,
the darling,
thereby getting herself full immunity, walking the hell away from this with blood literally on her hands, is because at some point during this, for whatever reason, which maybe we'll get into here in the foreseeable future, Charles Manson and the quote unquote Manson girls, the defendants in this case prior to Tex Watson's involvement in these trials, right? Because he had his own separate trial. They were all just, oh my goodness, the decision to have no defense. We need to figure out when that happened, because it really colors these stories and why someone might commit a cover-up or allow the creep, Linda Kasabian, to not suffer any justice for what we did. We've got on the second night to digress. Leslie Van Houten, who allegedly post-mortem stabbed the rear of the thighs of Rosemary LaBianca, and that's how she allegedly got out, because that's what she's saying she did, right? I feel Linda much more guilty, much more culpable, very much part of the planning, very much involved in the conspiracy, very much an ugly, hateful woman who had a lot of financial motivation to pull this off. Stephen Parent?
Yeah.
What's the weirdest thing they said about him? Maybe he was up there trying to have a little hookup with Garrettson. Like, so the love his family had for him, the personal loss everybody experienced around Stephen Parent. Fucking bummer, dude.
Man, that's the part that kills me the most.
Right.
Is he had a younger brother and sister, his mom and dad, when they found out that he passed.
They had never had him not check in. They were up all night, upset, worried about him. Like, hey, where's Stephen?
When they found out, the whole family was sleeping in bed together for like a month.
Huddled in bed, fucking crying. That's exactly, yeah, man. Like, that messed you up too, huh?
Yeah.
That was rough to take.
Yeah.
So we talk about these things, man, but it's never not about the victims' families. And that one for me is the hardest to take. That is the least sensical. The person who literally had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Because he could have been let go. They could have hid and let him drive out of there.
And what would it have changed in the end? Right?
Yeah.
They didn't know that. And guess what? Tex is at the height of his hot butt. They just get there. You're looking for a conflict. Kill everyone in the house was allegedly the directive he had, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go with Tex.
Well, no, I don't know about that. That's what Tex says.
Go with Tex and do what he says, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
So he's doing the same, right? So he's all keyed up. Hey, coach, what are we doing? First guy he sees. Like, that's pretty plausible. And they pushed the car out of the way. Sure. Creepy Linda Kasabian. What is she doing? First thought, I like money. We came up here for money. I don't know if I'm going to kill, but I'm going to get some money.
Whoa,
I'm going to get some money.
You just brought up something huge, though, because
I do that sometimes.
I just read it in testimony the other day. Nancy Pittman, volume 91. She was saying that Linda knew the people up there. She got burned by people up there.
Very casually, she said that.
Yeah.
I was reading this testimony too as well. That's why I got so excited. Started shaking George's book on. It's all here, people. Cielo Drive. Get over there. Doc Comment, man. Deb Silva, Bo, we can't thank you enough spiritually. You're mainly behind the scenes people. I understand it. Hard lesson for me personally. Hard to take, Bo. We love you. We'd love to chat with you directly. Never going to happen. But the information you've given on that and our ability to sift through it, 91. That chapter was incredible.
Now I've heard rumors, two other rumors. One that on Tuesday, before days before, her and Tex went up there.
Infamous murders. I believe that to be true.
There's actually the neighbor, the girl that lived down at the bottom of the street, said that she saw a woman and a man walking up the street earlier that afternoon on Friday.
And people wonder, why would you walk up? Why would you take the time? Because there was no turnaround. If you weren't going to drive on the property, it was near impossible. You couldn't turn around. You had to back out. So Why would they go walking that far?
Maybe because they were not guests at the Tate residence.
Right? So
Mhm.
that, to me, these are all very big salient points. But man, Linda Kasabian, I mean, there's levels of scumminess in this thing.
There's even a story out
But
there.
that she scrapes the material of the bottom below the scum line out. That woman is so disgusting.
There's even a story though that Tex and Linda went up that afternoon, right? And that Linda was welcomed in by Abigail, and that they went into the bathroom and did a line together, and that Linda paid Abigail for drugs that they were going to come back and
Well, they were
get
sampling
that
it,
night.
allegedly.
Yeah,
And that's
allegedly.
where,
Okay, hold up. Nicholas Schreck, though you just got taken the hell apart by our girl rotting Jules.
Dana, woman, I hope you're watching. Anyway, dude, Shrekberry, we love you, and this is where he gets his trip started on the drug burns, and I think a lot of that is legit. I think a lot of what he talks about is true. I think he takes some very interesting angles with it. Now, what are your thoughts on some of the things you've spoken to Nick personally? And that's why we don't take any sides with anybody. We can find humor in all of our own things. You want to do a deep dive on me, you're going to have a lot of funny, embarrassing, cringy shit. I promise. But that being said, now, how do you feel about what Nick has brought up in this early part of the murders? Physically, at CLO, we've breached the property. We're assaulting Stephen Parent, and Nick has a lot to say about the motivations and everything leading up to that. Like, there's way more of a ball of wax before they get there.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on some of that color the discussion from the Manson file point of view?
Well, I personally believe that it's drug burn theory and love brother theory. So I think that Linda and Susan, they had their reason for going, right?
Right.
Susan and I guess Pat had their reason for going, and Tex and Linda had their reason for going.
Well, and if you look at that, we're going to say, the Goodbye Helter Skelter, the first two you mentioned were more about being down for Charlie. And the second two seem to be more down for themselves and this enterprise and what they had going. Now, if we're going to talk about a drug burn, then we got to look at, well, clearly, Charles Manson, the most evil man in modern history behind Adolf Hitler, must have masterminded this whole murderous scenario in order to further the Dune Buggy Attack Battalion of Helter Skelter.
See, that needs to be thrown out. And also,
Okay, so we're throwing that out.
Yeah,
collectively as
it wasn't
Twilight.
to start. It wasn't to start a race war. It wasn't to scare Hollywood another.
Sorry, Blue, not scaring Hollywood here.
Another theory that needs to get thrown out
that
was popular for years, 30 plus years, was Charlie sent people there to take out Melcher as a revenge.
Right.
Charlie knew that Melcher wasn't living there. Charlie had been to Melcher's new place in Malibu
many times.
Yeah.
Like
Catherine Sher talked
times.
about it in the most recent documentary that came out. That she knocked on the door. She was with Charlie and went to the house.
Hey, babe.
So this thought that.
But wait a minute. We also spoke about that because what other celebrities?
Mr. Sly Stone.
Other people had encountered
Yeah.
Charlie
Yep.
over a period of weeks, if not months. How long do you think that period was that they'd hung out at Malibu? Because there was a little bit of a delay before he went down there, but he was sighted up down there as he was by your sources, Bernard Crow's throughout the summer.
Yeah. So they moved out in January. And so anytime between January and July, he was over there. Now this is important. This is an important piece. Greg Jacobson says that he was over at Melcher's place, and Melcher was watching this yacht. I don't know if it was what it is. It's a yacht competition or something.
From his regatta.
A regatta. He's watching them out on the ocean. He's using his green spyglass that was his mother's to watch this regatta, whatever race. Now, Jacobson said that that occurred towards the end of July. So at some point between the end of July and the murders,
it wouldn't be hard to isolate the date.
Charlie himself went to Melcher's house, snuck up on his balcony, and stole his green spyglass.
Much is made of that.
Which was later found at Barker Ranch.
And then allegedly he left the bullet with Terry's name on it, right?
Which I have a hard time believing too.
Right. Just like the whole threats with, I do believe some of the threats against Dennis Wilson, though. And I speak too much for other people, and I try not to do that. But as a human being who could relate to some of these situations, I've been in similar situations, not the same ones, of course, because, hey, I didn't experience this other person's life. I'm not thinking for them. But if you put me in a situation where you stole at least 2 of my songs, recorded one of them, bastardized it, promised me X amount of money, didn't deliver the money, and then I'm theorizing based on what I've heard, I think there's perhaps one presentable, if not raw demos, fairly well produced demos of at least one record of Charles Manson's, if not one finished, and a second of demos.
A lot of it has been conflated though, because I was just going through Charlie's parole documents.
Okay.
And he's sending letters.
Is that what you brought? Okay.
He's sending letters to his PO saying that, oh yeah, I sold 2 of my songs to Dennis Wilson.
I sold at least one.
He said the first one, he's been floating me cash, taking care of my expenses, basically helping me to live. And he says, when he gets back from his tour, we're going to sit down and negotiate what I was going to be compensated for the second song. So there's a lot of this like lying by Charlie that's going on, that he sold my songs.
Well, wait a minute.
No, you were getting compensated for them.
Now where did you get this?
Charlie, in his own words from his parole document.
Okay, so now let's talk about that, because that makes a whole effing lot of sense. Okay. People are, why
would you let the Ticks, known collectively as the murderous Manson family, come from their dirtbag ranch and stay on your gorgeous estate with peacocks?
Baka, right? And then you have Lynn say, hey man, we were completely welcome there. We weren't sluts. We weren't fucking people we didn't want to fuck. That's not how we are. And let me tell you something. Having met the people I've met, let me tell you something. They were of character. They're not running around doing nasty, weird shit as they're accused of. This like sexual fucking wasn't happening, right? But there was a lot of brotherly and sisterly love, whatever the fuck going on, okay? But they're at this home. You think Charlie doesn't know the shit costs money? How are you going to slide into the rock star life? Hey, babe, give me a couple songs. We're here at the compound. We got 17 girls. We're kicking. And that's all in the article. And I think Dennis Wilson even says that in the article, that we're going to sit down collectively as brother recordings.
Yeah.
And have a conversation with the Wizard, our new recording artist. This is all substantiated.
They even had a deal once Charlie was arrested and in jail with the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys said, we'll pay you $5,000 per song that you write in jail.
Now, could you clarify those documents for us, please? Because as Stoner, our dear friend,
Stoner Van Houten of the Spawn Worker channel, Mr. Stoner Van Houten would say, show me the receipts.
That's a document, I believe, that was issued or written up by Nick Grillo, the business manager for the Beach Boys.
Correct.
And I think that he sent it to either Manson's attorney or to his parole. It must have been his attorney at that point. And I think that Charlie signed it. I just don't know if while in prison he produced any songs. Now, somewhere in Brian Wilson's vault are a bunch of recordings of Charlie that
Maybe survived the
haven't.
Palisades
Yeah.
fire. We don't know. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I've seen the weirdest shit happen since I've been studying this case. Like, you can take something small, it will blow up into the wildest thing. That's why it's really hard to, I don't want to overspeak. I never want to say the wrong
No.
thing, because you can crater somebody's shit.
I want to
Really
end,
well.
end,
Now,
end on
could you
this.
clarify
We
that,
got to
please? Yeah.
get going. But Nick was telling me the other day, he shared with me a Beach Boys recording that's on YouTube that was released recently by the remaining members. Now, that recording that they put out, Charlie is playing guitar on that track.
This is correct.
And they would
Nick,
would not have put that out had they known that Charlie was on that track. So it was a mistake by the current Beach Boys.
Right.
But
well,
yeah,
that just shows the volume of work he must have been on, because you got to be on at least a few tracks for one of them just to get mushed in there.
Mhm.
And then, like I say, are they going to use this fire as another way to keep this music hidden, to not allow it to see the light of day? Because unfortunately, man, I think the fact that the music stands up after all this time, the fact that the Family Jams record, of which the architect, Charles Manson, was not present in the music, the main player had been alienated from the core of the quote unquote family for a year and a half, came back, played with the student who wasn't an aficionado, who was not a good musician until the architect Charles Manson of this music taught him, Steve Grogan. Steve Grogan, Baby Paul, played this music. And you know what? It's third-rate acoustic folk group singing. Let's see, what would that be called? Arranged. It's not orchestral, but it's like, so you've got this vocal acoustic folk music group singing, and it's not bad, dude. After all this time, and you listen to some of what Lynn said, they put a lot of love, heart, effort, and feeling into their music. It was a joyous, beautiful expression. And I really feel there was a lot of commitment and love. And I feel if you're going to say Manson family, we're talking about the Manson family jams, and they were actually a musical group. And I just, that getting swept.
That's a whole nother topic.
I just think I think we need to introduce that. Musicians came to kill. All these people had been involved in making music. So by extension, you're a musician. You've learned at least the songs that the Family Jams knew. Okay. And that's what? At least a dozen pretty joyful songs. Most of them. Home is where your heart is.
We'll go all into it later.
Right.
Yep.
But then this is what you're carrying, as well as
Go up to the house
Yep.
and kill them all.
And then if you realize, again, in 91, what did she say? We didn't know if there were 1 or 10 people there. We were just going to kill them all. They went up with buck knives, a dude and 3 chicks. We're leaving with that. Twilighters.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness.